From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. Venezuela Interior Justice and Peace Minister Néstor Reverol has announced that a terrorist cell has been dismantled. In an official news conference, Reverol said that together with the Public Prosecutor's Office, the investigations led to the arrest of Roberto Marrero, who is directly responsible for the organization of criminal groups. Marrero is opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido's chief of staff.
Roberto Eugenio Marrero Borgas was detained, and a cache of war weapons and foreign currency was confiscated during a raid at his house this morning with the public ministry. Also, 34-year-old Luis Alberto Páez Salazar was detained, who was a guard for the suspect mentioned before. Also, vehicles, cell phones, and a lot of more important evidence for the investigation was found. The investigation is related to the coup they tried to start by entering our border. The false humanitarian aid from February 23rd, trying to violate our sovereignty, and also after the electrical sabotage, these criminal groups are continually trying to disrupt life in Venezuela.
And in Geneva, the UN Human Rights Council has approved by a large majority a resolution presented by Venezuela on behalf of the non-aligned movement. On Twitter, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza says the resolution was, quote, on the negative effects of unilateral coercive measures like sanctions, like those imposed by the U.S. Arreaza celebrated, saying, another victory for multilateralism and the diplomacy of peace. The resolution also calls on the Human Rights Council to organize a panel on the way forward to a UN declaration on the negative impact of the sanctions. Activists who stand in support of Venezuela's sovereignty have taken matters into their own hands as Venezuelan opposition members tried to take over diplomatic offices in the U.S.
These people slept in the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. They made that decision after the Venezuelan opposition, with support of the U.S. government, decided to take over 3 diplomatic buildings in the United States.
They say they were going to take over this building, and we are telling them stop. We say this is against international law. We have asked for permission to be here, so we were invited. We spent the night and all day today, and we'll spend the night too.
And we're here to show that we're not leaving. We stand in solidarity with the Bolivarian Revolution and the legitimate elected government of Nicolás Maduro.
The Venezuelan opposition has justified the taking over the buildings, including the Venezuelan consulate in New York.
We want to set a democratic system. We want to rebuild our country, and at the same time, we want to rebuild this type of facilities that we are controlling now in the U.S.
Activists are wondering what would have happened if those buildings belonged to the United States.
Oh, well, we've seen what that would happen in that before. Think about like Iran in 1979, for example, or, many other instances where U.S. embassies have been, besieged or, taken over or whatever, and it was seen as a declaration of war.
This will be war. It will be a justification for the U.S. military intervention.
The United States does not stop its pressure against the Bolivarian government, but neither do the shows of solidarity with the government of Nicolás Maduro.
The U.S. has threatened countries that support Venezuela with new sanctions. However, one of Washington's most recent targets, Russia, is rejecting their so-called ultimatum.
Russia has reinforced its support for Venezuela's government, as well as for the development of shared projects, including energy and military cooperation between the two countries.
Russia is fulfilling its obligation of cooperation with all territories, including Latin American countries, and specifically Venezuela. The relationship between our companies, including Rosneft Petrol Company and Venezuela, is solid and ongoing.
Both countries will meet in April as part of the Mixed Commission with the goal of strengthening ties and cooperation in various areas.
We sent a great group of military planes. We are building factories for producing automatic assault rifles, Kalashnikov. We are building a center for a fleet of military defense helicopters. We are providing armored vehicles. It is not secret. We hope that our technical military cooperation continues.
The Russian Foreign Ministry has rejected the sanctions against the Venezuelan oil company PDVSA. It has also rejected Washington's strategy and attempts to overthrow the Maduro government with the help of armed groups.
We have already talked about the purchase plan for East Europe and the illegal supply of a large number of Venezuelan weapons. And by the way, recently it was made clear that the U.S. intelligence service are working to contact drug traffickers to gather information about the illegal border crossings.
Russian authorities continue working with Venezuela, while also promoting dialogue between the Venezuelan government and the opposition as a way to bring a peaceful solution to the current situation.
Former Brazilian President Michel Temer has been flown to Rio de Janeiro after he was arrested in connection with the Lava Jato corruption investigation. Temer was detained in Sao Paulo and taken to the airport. He is expected to be held in preventive detention as investigations proceed. Temer is accused of receiving a bribe of almost $300,000 for his election campaign in one of 5 corruption cases against him. Arrest warrants were also issued for 7 of Temer's associates. The Attorney General said this was part of a much wider criminal conspiracy.
This criminal group, which was arrested today, has been active, or at least part of the group has been active for almost 40 years.
Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Muir, has more.
On the morning of March 21st, Rio de Janeiro judge Marcelo Bretas issued an arrest warrant for Michel Temer and 9 of his political cronies, and shortly afterwards Temer was arrested by the federal police in the city of Sao Paulo. Now, Temer has been under investigation since 2017 for various large crimes involving corruption. The first of which is the formation of an organized crime group which allegedly took place in 2006 between Michel Temer, who led the group, and other political operatives connected to his PMDB party, including former congressional president and 2016 coup architect Eduardo Cunha, who's in jail right now. Now, allegedly, this group collected over 500 million reais in bribes over the last 13 years. And Temer's also being accused of trying to obstruct justice by blocking the Lava Jato investigation, setting up a patronage system where he sold jobs in the federal government while he was president. He's being accused of negotiating the purchase of votes in favor of the 2016 impeachment, which, if he's convicted of, should technically invalidate that impeachment. Will that really happen? Only time will tell. But for now, the former president of Brazil is in jail.
We thank Brian for that report. Temer's arrest had been expected for some time, and many Brazilians welcomed it. The Attorney General's office had twice accused him of corruption while he was president, but Congress blocked the charges.
I think Temer going to prison was very fair. In my opinion, it was long overdue.
It's a great day. It had to happen because for those who waste public resources, those involved in corruption or in bad things, for those who only seek power, I think we must apply the law to them too, not only to the most vulnerable.
The left in Brazil also welcomed the arrest. The leader of the PSOL, Guillermo Boulos, said on Twitter, Temer is a thug who should have been imprisoned a long time ago. There is strong evidence against him, not mere convictions. And the Workers' Party wrote, the PT hopes that the arrest of Michel Temer and his minister Moreira Franco have been carried out on the basis of consistent facts respecting the legal process and not just on the basis of speculation and false denunciations, as happened in the case of Lula da Silva. Haitian President Jovenel Moïse has appointed Jean-Michel Lapine as interim prime minister. Former Prime Minister Jean-Henri Sant submitted his resignation on Thursday, saying he wants to avoid any issues. This comes just 3 days after a majority of lawmakers in the lower house passed a motion to remove Sant. He was appointed Prime Minister 6 months ago and has had a number of disagreements with Moise. The death toll in Mozambique following Cyclone Idai has increased to 217 as 3,000 people have been rescued. The Land and Environment Minister said around 15,000 people, many of them in poor health, still need to be rescued. He added that rescue workers have continued to find bodies and the death toll could rise sharply. Thursday's operation are pushing to areas that have not yet been explored.
What we have realized is that we're finding a lot of people in the high areas where we plant, which is one of the good news. The bad news is that we have lost already 217 lives. There's still a lot of people on the ground in need of rescue. The rescue teams are working. We're working with 120 specialists and a lot of teams to keep on rescue.
About 200,000 people affected by Cyclone Idai in Zimbabwe will need to be provided with food for the next 3 months. That's according to the UN World Food Programme. The death toll in Zimbabwe stands at 139, while 56 people have been killed in Malawi. The hardest hit district of Chimanimani will need supplies for the months to come. Access to the affected areas has remained a challenge, but several countries have reportedly been providing necessary aid.
In Zimbabwe, we receive some alarming news during the night. The weather continues to cause massive destruction with heavy rain reported in Manicaland and Masvingi provinces. The Maro-Wayaneti Down in Bwera has overflowed, raising rivers level and putting populations along the banks at risk.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Enjoy the best content in spaces where you will discover new perspectives, innovation, well-being, conservation, equity, traditions. A wide variety of contents that you will find on Telesur, the news source of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Jamaica's government has allocated the equivalent of $635 million US to provide water in more rural communities. This means that over 61,000 persons in those areas will have access to potable water. The initiative was announced earlier this week during the budget presentation.
This government has allocated $795 million for the upcoming year for rural water. That's the highest allocation. This is 7 times higher than what the previous allocation was. Depending on how our revenue targets look, we could very well consider an addition to rural water, because they deserve it. Whenever I go around the country and I see what people have to go through, they deserve.
Barbadians will be able to open foreign currency bank accounts in their country from July, as the Myanmar administration begins to loosen nearly 5 decades of foreign exchange controls. Prime Minister Modi made the announcement during her maiden budget presentation on Wednesday, pointing out that several countries have successfully relaxed their controls. Modi boasted that Barbados' international reserves were now close to the targeted 15 weeks.
Are targeted to bring that to under 100. Our reserves have risen from just over the 400 million that they were when we inherited them at the end of May last year. At its lowest point, it was actually down to 300 and change in March. But as of 400 million odd we inherited, today our reserves stand at $1.1 billion. Yes, sir. I am told by my economic advisors that we shall hit that 15-week import cover in the next few days on current trajectory.
The government and opposition in Nicaragua are heading towards a new dialogue process. Our correspondent in Managua, Maria Jose Diaz, has more details.
Parties reunited to the negotiating table in Nicaragua today to begin a new phase of dialogue. This after they overcame the second pause of the process following the achievement of a consensuated agenda negotiated among the two parties. In a joint communique, the government and opposition agreed to develop in an immediate and simultaneous way different points to strengthen democracy and reform the electoral processes, to strengthen human rights guarantees, and also to free in 90 days all the political prisoners and others detained in the incidents that have transpired since April 2018. Another negotiating issue is a search for truth, justice, and reparations, and to make sure the crimes are not repeated. Once the implementing mechanisms for these agreements have been reached, there will be a search for internal support. For the moment, in a joint agreement, there will be an international call to suspend sanctions to facilitate the right to human, economic, social development, to help the most vulnerable sectors of the population.
We thank Maria Jose for that report. The second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation kicked off on Wednesday in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Over 1,000 representatives from 193 nations are attending the summit.
The high-level meeting seeks to reinforce global cooperation strategies, but under the influence of superpowers like the United States.
This summit is taking place on the shadow of a global crisis. Inequality is fast on the rise. Exclusion becomes more and more apparent every day, and the majority of the population lives in poverty.
This meeting, hosted by the UN, aims to promote cooperation and diplomacy as a means of national development. And yet, they fail to provide concrete answers that would actually help developing nations.
In some cases, we have lost the governments, but we have never lost the people. This was the belief behind the International Assembly of the Peoples, held in Caracas a few weeks ago. That meeting gathered social movements and political parties from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Summits such as that one are the way forward.
4 regional presidents attended the UN meeting. They are 4 right-wing leaders who want to create a new bloc named PROSUR, which will replace UNASUR, the regional bloc created over 10 years ago by the progressive governments of Hugo Chavez, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, Néstor Kirchner, and Evo Morales.
The main goal of this project, which came to life in the United States, just like the Lima Group, is to eradicate UNASUR, the regional bloc which, for the longest time, has destabilized U.S. foreign policy in the region.
UNASUR is soon to be destroyed, an organization which was key for Latin American integration, for collective cooperation. Now we have an initiative that promotes intervention in other nations' internal affairs, which would also promote military invasions, especially against Venezuela, a key nation for Latin American stability.
During what's seen as the most important global cooperation meeting, developing nations are hoping to strengthen relations with other countries. But the problem is they have not been offered any solution to the issues plaguing those most in need.
The Peruvian Justice Minister has appeared before Congress to answer inquiries about the Odebrecht deal. Lawmakers asked 21 questions to the minister, Vicente Ceballos. After the minister's answers, there will be a debate about the agreement signed by the state prosecutors and Odebrecht Construction Company. Around 250,000 Colombian teachers took to the streets on Wednesday to demand higher funding for education, healthcare improvements, and job security.
The main streets of many Colombian cities were witness to another demonstration by teachers during a day they called the Great Takeover, and which set off a two-day strike in schools and public universities. Their demands are a higher budget for public education, an end to privatization, and rejection to a development plan presented by the President Iván Duque.
The government of Iván Duque has presented to Congress an underfinanced development plan that makes no concessions for public schools, for school lunches, for daycare centers, not to mention how poor our healthcare benefits are.
Neither cold nor rain prevented teachers from marching in defense of public education. They say that the national government and its development plan are working towards the complete privatization of education, and they do this by not increasing the budget for a sector that has a deficit exceeding $7 billion.
We are fighting for a realist budget, for it to not be reduced every single year. Not all schools have the same needs. Maybe in small towns, there are greater needs. Kids want to learn, and yet they have to sit on the grass because they don't have a classroom.
For many, their fight is on the streets, standing in defense to their autonomy, which is also threatened by right-wing sectors who push for indoctrination rather than education.
We are educating children, giving them tools to see the country's reality. It's not our fault that our country's history is so bad. We educate. While they indoctrinate, they have the media. All we have as a tool is education.
Aware of their role in society, teachers also condemned any kind of military intervention in Venezuela and called for a peaceful solution to the social conflicts that plague the country. They also announced that they will continue to hold meetings with the Ministry of Education, and if they cannot arrive to an agreement, they will consider the possibility of calling for a national strike.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Guide your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Namibian President Dr. Hage Geingob has called for unity as the country celebrates 29 years of freedom. Hundreds rejoiced as they recalled getting their freedom from South Africa. Namibia was under the South Africa rule for 24 years. Kenya's president attended the ceremony. The two presidents have scheduled bilateral talks in hopes of boosting their economies. The treasures from Tutankhamun's tomb have been displayed at an exhibition show for the first time in Paris. Organizers say more than a third of the artifacts are leaving Egypt for the first and last time before going to a new museum being built near the Giza pyramids in Egypt. Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Gardner, about 3,400 years after his death.
You know, the ancient Egyptians had
deep belief of what they were doing, and they wanted to achieve everything for the king with perfection. When you look at the guardian statue, it doesn't matter where you are standing, in front or on the side of the statue doesn't look at us at all. He doesn't look at our world, the living world. He's looking far beyond us. He's looking to the eternity.
At least 79 people have died after a ferry sank in the Tigris River near the city of Mosul in Iraq. According to the Mosul Civil Defense Authority, most of the casualties were women and children who could not swim. At least 50 people were rescued. The authorities said the vessel may have sunk due to a technical problem. Thousands of Kurdish people have participated in the New Year celebrations in the Turkish city of Diyarbakir. Kurds danced to traditional music and burned a fire in a celebration that marks the beginning of spring. The festivities are often accompanied by heavy security, as Turkish authorities fear that they would be used by Kurds to express their desire for a unified Kurdish state.
Preparations were made for this festivity in keeping with the traditions that have been passed down to us in our childhood by our fathers, grandfathers, and mothers. When we were young, we were dressed like this and sent to the festivities. Now we are grown-ups. We do this by ourselves.
President Donald Trump wants the U.S. to officially recognize Israel's control over occupied Golan Heights. Trump tweeted, quote, "After 52 years, it is time for the U.S. to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability." Israel captured Golan Heights from Syria in 1967 and annexed it in 1981. However, the move has not been recognized by the international community. Trump's announcement aims to give a boost to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who faces a tough April 9th election as he battles corruption allegations. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Enjoy the best content in spaces where you will discover new perspectives. Innovation. Well-being, conservation,